The Oilers are heading into a crucial part of the offseason as a new GM candidate is rumored to take the job. But before we get into the breakdown and the challenges the new GM will have to face into the upcoming season, make sure to subscribe here to Oilers Digest. We are almost at 1,300 subscribers. Do yourself a favor and click the subscribe button down below as we get into the rest of free agency, into training camp, and into the regular season in regards to the Oilers cap situation. What's going to happen? Who knows? But let's get right into it today. So as I mentioned in the intro, a new name enters the GM Thunderdome. And before we get into who exactly that will be, Jeff Jackson was on the Bob McCown podcast the other day, and Bob McCown sort of grilled him about who's going to be the new GM, what's exactly going to happen, and why didn't Jeff Jackson take over the job. And of course, Jeff Jackson mentioned time and time again he wasn't interested in taking over the day-to-day duties of a GM. He liked doing, the free agency part, the drafting part, but to be in Edmonton, week in, week out, day-to-day, travel with the team to games, that's not really something he wants to do. But he had a criteria sort of laid out, a progressive attitude, a collaborative attitude, a very good communicator. Those are things that I'm looking for. It doesn't have to be someone who has a ton of experience as a GM. And as for when Jackson hopes to have a GM in place, he has a basic time frame in mind. Says I don't want to put a time frame on it, but probably within the next week to 10 days, I would think. And of course, that was a few days ago. So the clock is ticking for Jeff Jackson to name a successor to the interim GM role that he is taking over. And there's a new name in the running here for GM, and that is Brian Lawton. David Staples from the Cult of Hockey on Edmonton Journal has this to say about him. He said, for years now, Lawton has been regularly interviewed on Oilers Now, where he's demonstrated a huge amount of hockey knowledge in regards to contract negotiation, the salary cap, player relations, team construction, and analytics from his time as an agent. He'll have an acute understanding of what players are looking for in a team, an aspect of management now mission critical. And of course, Brian Lawton himself, the youngest captain in NHL history. I do believe he still holds that record, played for 6 teams, and he was a player turned agent, and he was an agent up until the Tampa Bay Lightning hired him as GM. That was the only team he's been the general manager for from June of 2008. So pretty much the very beginning of the Steven Stamkos era, right until 2010, and then that's when Steve Yzerman took over and began the Tampa version of the Yzer plan. And then adding on here, of course, the second paragraph, an important job here is to get in sync with Jackson and Edmonton's 2-star players, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And Jeff Jackson has stressed there will be a new deal with Draisaitl, or there will be, no new deal, I should say, with Draisaitl until a new GM is in place, and Draisaitl can be certain he's on the same page with that team leader. Of course, that'd be important for a team, sort of a team duo of Jeff Jackson and Brian Lawton. There's 2 GMs who used to be agents. I sort of think of it as a Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford situation in Vancouver, where it's not one main leader. It's, a collaborative effort that Jackson and a guy like Brian Lawton, or maybe another name like Matthew Darsh, who I mentioned in previous videos, or other GM candidates that sort of don't take the reins, but they help with Jeff Jackson as he makes these important decisions for the Oilers. But for now, the Oilers would like a new GM so they can, get in the driver's seat when it comes to contract negotiations. And lastly here, David Staples said he's always been impressed with Lawton's intelligence and his tact as he's commented and critiqued the Oilers over the years. I know there are multiple articles over, trade deadline or free agency where Brian Lawton didn't like how the Oilers didn't keep up with the Western Conference arms race, of course, at the trade deadline this past season. Other teams got better, the Oilers didn't. Of course, hindsight is 2020. Said one thing is clear is his belief in building a team from the defense out, which is why one of his key moves in Tampa was to select Victor Hedman over slip forwards like Matt Duchene, Evander Kane, or Braden Shen in the 2009 entry draft. Of course, that was Brian Lawton's sort of best draft pick. Didn't have many hits on draft picks, but of course the Oilers do have, a very they're building their draft, their scouting from the inside out. Of course, Jeff Jackson fired Tyler Wright, who was the director of scouting throughout, the Ken Holland era. Wasn't too strong on that regard. So Jeff Jackson, he's building a new culture in Edmonton, which I really appreciate. Hiring a guy like in previous videos like Stan Bowman, like it or not, it would sort of destroy all the goodwill that Jeff Jackson has brought to the summer of the Oilers as they go back to, trying to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. But Brian Lawton, I'd be on board for that move. Of course, Jeff Jackson is his final call in the end. But really, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen with that? Of course, lots of analysis. Jeff Jackson likes to keep things very tight-lipped around the Edmonton media. Of course, with the Edmonton media, who are hungry for every single piece of news that will go out into the news cycles. Jeff Jackson, appreciate that he keeps a very tight lip on this, and nothing really gets out. I mean, like the Ryan McLeod trade, nobody had any idea until the news for that broke. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the new GM and getting into the contract news. Yes, there was a tweet the other day, or yesterday, I should say. We'll get into that in a second. But the Too Much Hockey podcast, multiple sources tell us tonight that Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid and Evan Bouchard are all willing in this case to take team-friendly deals in the next contract extensions in hopes of the Oilers winning the Cup multiple times over the next 8 to 9 seasons. Taking less to win more has been talked about with these three players. It's something to keep an eye on over the next 2 to 3 weeks, as Leon will set the standard first. And of course, this kind of reminds me of the big three for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, Letang, Crosby, and Malkin. Of course, Crosby, was paid what he deserved, obviously. But it was sort of that culture that the Penguins built with those three to sort of take less to build a better team. And of course, they achieved that with guys like Phil Kessel, Patrick Hornquist, Marc-Andre Fleury, who also didn't take a big contract number. But seeing here, with this article here, fair market value for McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard. Let's see what they could get, projected here from AFP Analytics. We can get a rough estimate for what a deal surrounding each of these players looks like. For Bouchard, they are projecting an 8-year, $9.68 million cap hit extension, while a 7-year, $12.92 million deal is predicted for Draisaitl, which is a significant bump up from his $8.5 million that he signed, 7 years ago. Everyone thought it was an overpay at the time. I thought it was a bit risky, but it paid off in the end, and they presently don't have a projection up for McDavid. At this point, kind of a blank check for McDavid, but in the postseason interviews, everyone on that Oiler team was committed to keeping that core together to make another run at it. I know Adam Henrique signed a contract that was very, very team-friendly, and same with Victor Arvidsson when they could have went into, tested free agency and got a lot more what they signed for. But let's see what a team-friendly deal would look like for these three. These numbers I love tremendously. If McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard were to sign for $12 million, $10.33 million, and $7.74 million, each oil country would be doing cartwheels all season long, as would I. I mean, I do a cartwheel for a video, and for sake of comparison, here's what a 15% discount would look like, and you can see the numbers obviously down below. Bouchard, I think that's a fair contract. Draisaitl, I think he could get a little more, and then McDavid, I mean, that's as team friendly as it can get. It's not so much, the $15 million that I projected McDavid to see, and even Draisaitl. I know there was an interview with his agent, and he said he was playing something like 30% below his value, and 30% add that on to his current salary, and that'd be a little over. I believe it was $11.5 million. So for that, I would be more than happy. But let's see some other projections here. There's some athletic player cards. For Evan Bouchard, you can see, his market value, $17 million. I mean, for a guy like him, like that comes at a premium. Right-handed shot, offensive defenseman. Defense, the numbers are a little lacking, but I mean, offensively, what more could you ask from the guy? He had a coming-out party in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and with him and Mattias Ekholm, one of the best top pairs in the league, and you can see the surplus value, what he's kind of saving the Oilers on. $17 million. Is that, realistic in the current salary cap? Maybe if it goes up significantly in the next couple of years, but right now I don't see it at all. And then Leon Draisaitl here, market value $12 million. I mean, yeah, that's perfect for a guy like Leon Draisaitl. He obviously deserves, a bit of a raise, but again, the team-friendly discounts, if they're really true to their word, they could probably sign for a little less than, what these market values and projections are going off here. And then lastly here, Connor McDavid, I mean, the guy is priceless. I mean, market value $17.5 million when he's only making $12.5 for, $9 million surplus. So for, all three guys, it's very critical that the Oilers, get into negotiations, they don't want to drag their feet. Of course, this is not nearly close to a Tavares situation here on Long Island when the Islanders were kind of middling in the pack there, and Tavares of course wanted to go to his hometown. But for these three, I believe they are committed to the Edmonton Oilers, and I have no worries about Jeff Jackson or whoever the new general manager is to get all three signed long term. I don't know about 8 years for Bouchard. He might sign like a 4 or 5. Get another, big contract down the road. But for Leon and Connor, 8 years, whatever they want. I mean, that's just the star player standard, I should say, with the NHLPA. They obviously want the star players to get their bag, I should say, so the teams don't have any leverage over star players. But let me know down in the comments what you think the Oilers should pay for all three. Are those projections fair? Should they be a little higher? Should they be a little lower? Thoughts on Brian Lawton as a potential Oilers GM? Let me know down in the comments. Have yourselves a great weekend. I'm Matt.